Once upon a time, a long time ago, there lived a man named Nimrod. Nimrod was the great-grandson of Noah. He was the most popular man on the earth at the time. Matter of fact, he was the king of the then-known world. He was responsible for building the cities of Babel, and the Tower of Babel, and the city of Nineveh, amongst others. He created great armies right after the flood. He was full of idolatry and covetousness, drunkenness, and rebelliousness towards God. But Nimrod married a woman named Semiramis. Now Semiramis and Nimrod became basically king and queen of the then known world. Well, at some point, Nimrod dies, and he became deified. He was the very first person that was ever deified on planet Earth, and they made him the sun god, which ended up being Baal. The word Baal in your scriptures can be traced back to Nimrod. So it's an interesting reality of history. When you see Baal and Ashtaroth, you're ended up coming all the way back to this story of Nimrod and Semiramis. Semiramis gets pregnant by Nimrod, and she gives birth to a young baby boy named Tammuz. Now, further down in the story, as Tammuz grows and becomes a man, Tammuz actually marries his mother, and they have a very sexual relationship. And that baby Tammuz and his mother Semiramis is where you get the story of Cupid. Cupid, during Valentine's Day, is how the story of Valentine's Day developed, was from Tammuz, who married a very unbiblical relationship with his mother. Okay, back to the story of Tammuz. So Tammuz, for 40 years, was a tremendous hunter, and he took the place of his father, ruling the world, and had tremendous power. But more than anything, he was a credible hunter. But unfortunately, his gift and his skill of hunting caught up with him one day, because he was killed during his 40th year by a wild boar. Every spring, the first Sunday after the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, they have what was called Ishtar's Sunday. And they would have a sunrise service. At the sunrise service, the priest of Ishtar would impregnate young virgins on the altar, and during that same service, they would take the babies that were now 3-month-old from the previous year, and they would sacrifice those children on the altar to Ishtar, and then they would take the eggs of Ishtar, and they would dip those eggs in the blood of those young infants. And that is where we get sunrise services, and that is potentially where we get the dyeing of Easter eggs. It is also interesting to note that worldwide universal color of Easter eggs is red. Even the White House, the official color of the White House Easter egg is ruby red. Now, back to Tammuz. Tammuz gets killed by a wild boar. So every year, in commemoration of celebrating the death and the deification of Tammuz, which became the son of God, the son of his father, they would set aside 40 days prior to Easter, and they would fast and they would pray, and they would have a giant feast on Easter Sunday where they would celebrate the death and the resurrection of Tammuz. And guess what they would have for dinner on that Sunday evening? You got it, Easter ham. They would kill a boar in commemoration to Tammuz, who was killed by a wild boar. And yes, the 40 days prior to Easter, where we call it Lent, or the Catholics call it Lent, that 40 days did not come from, my friends, the 40 days of Jesus in the wilderness. That 40 days was already in place for thousands of years before Jesus even showed up. It comes from the 40 days of fasting and praying for Tammuz before they celebrated Easter. I'm going to give you some of the names and what they're most commonly remembered for in these different cultures, and some of you will recognize them immediately. First of all, in Egypt, they were known as Isis and Osiris. In Phoenicia, they were recognized as Asheroth and Baal, the very same Asheroth and Baal that you see in the scriptures. In Greece, they were Aphrodite and Adonis, or Eros, where we get the word erotic from. And in Rome, they were called Venus and Cupid. That's right, that's where we get Valentine's Day from, and Cupid. Even in the Far East, listen to this. This is amazing. Cupid was known as Zoroaster. Zoroaster is made up of two words, Zoro, which means seed of, and Asheroth, which is Easter. And so what Cupid actually means in the Far East is the seed of Easter, or the seed of his mother. Okay, God always tries to speak to the Israelites and warn them to stay away from Ashtaroth and Baal. Let's read the scriptures. Judges chapter 2 verse 13 says this, "And they forsook Yahweh and served Baal and Ashtaroth." 1 Samuel chapter 7 verse 4 says, "Then the children of Israel did put away Baalim and Ashtaroth and served Yahweh only." And last but not least, in Romans chapter 11 verse 4 it says, "But what says the answer of God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal." Right about this time, you're probably having that thought that I warned you about hit your brain, saying, that's not what it means to me. I celebrate the birth of Jesus, and I put all the focus on Jesus, and I celebrate his resurrection, and I want to focus on him. Well, your heart may be to want to focus on him, and you absolutely may do that. But the truth of the matter is that it doesn't matter how much we focus, how sincere we are, and how pure our hearts are. It only matters that are we worshiping him the way that he asks us to worship him, and is anything that we're doing offending him? Please keep an open mind as we move through the rest of this history and some of these symbols, which are very shocking, that you're going to find out how they moved through time and ended up in our Christian churches today. Tammuz and his mother Semiramis. If you look on your screen, you're going to see Isis and Osiris, or this is Ishtar and Tammuz. Now, some of you may be asking, well, wait a minute, I celebrate Easter. You're talking about Ishtar. Easter is actually the Anglicization of the word Ishtar. In other words, if you say Ishtar in English, it's pronounced Easter. That's how the etymology of that word evolved over time. What I want you to see is, I want you to see what's on her head is a crescent moon, and in the center of that crescent moon is the actual sun itself. And so the symbol of power of Isis, or Ishtar, was the crescent moon holding the sun itself, her deceased husband, Baal, the sun god. And you can see the baby there that is nursing from her breast. Ishtar was known as the goddess of the East, the bare-breasted fertility god of the East, or the sunrise, which is why they had the service at sunrise on Easter morning. Here on your screen, you see a pagan carving of the solar deity Baal Hadad, depicted as a disc in a crescent. Okay, you can see the half-moon disc there in the center of your screen with the sun that is cradled inside of it. And that is the sun god, as well as the crescent moon that surrounds it. Catholic Eucharist is actually the sun that is inside of that crescent moon, or not. Now, look very carefully on the right-hand side. You can see the moon, the crescent moon shaped, holding that sun or that wafer of bread. Here's a close-up of it right here. The crescent moon cradle with the sun-shaped monstrance of the Roman Catholic Church, thousands of years old. This comes right out of paganism and sun god worship, where it was the symbol of Baal and his wife Ishtar. Let's move on to another symbol. This is the symbol of the trident. The trident is the devil's pitchfork. It really is a symbol of Satan, of the horns of Satan. It's an ancient satanic and pagan hand gesture called the trident. The most famous one, of course, is Neptune's trident. We call it the devil's pitchfork, and that's where it comes from. It's just not a drawing that someone made up. This has history built into it of where these things come from. This is a pagan statue of Jupiter that has been renamed St. Peter, and he's holding up, guess what? The trident symbol. That symbol is a satanic symbol recognizing the power of the gods of the sun. You also see what is baby Jesus, supposed to be baby Jesus, is none other than baby Tammuz. And how do we know it's not Jesus? Because you see trident all over the place. you see the trident symbol in the hand of the infant Jesus, along with the tridents coming out of the statue's head. You'll see 3 tridents, 2 coming off the sides of the head and 1 coming off the top of the head. This is not baby Jesus, ladies and gentlemen. This is a pagan sun god, Tammuz, from the story of Baal, Nimrod, and Semiramis, ended up being Cupid in today's Valentine's Day. Even the Sacred Heart comes right out of paganism. That exact same symbol with the sun disk behind the Sacred Heart has to do with Baal and Tammuz, the sun gods. And you can see it all over the Roman Catholic Church and even in other pagan religions across the world. And where do we find this 8-pointed star, this solar wheel, this sun disk today? None other than on top of our Christmas trees. Now, I know all of us have been taught that the star on top of the Christmas tree represents the Star of Bethlehem, that the kings came in to find baby Jesus. But unfortunately, the star of the ancient pagan sun gods predates the star of the Christmas tree, the Star of Bethlehem, by over 1,000 years. They were taking the sunburst and connecting it to what you're going to learn in just a few minutes is the tree of Nimrod. And that is where we get our Christmas tree from and the star that we put on top. If you look carefully, you can see there is a tremendous significance and a similarity between the sunburst and the star that we put up there today. Here's the sun disk proudly displayed on top of Christmas trees in a mall. Matter of fact, this one doesn't even hide the fact that it's not a star, it's the sun. In the middle of winter, at this winter solstice, December 25th. That's right. That's where we get December 25th on Christmas Day, where we say that Jesus was born. Why did we choose Jesus being born on December 25th? Where did that date come from? Very simple. Jesus was the Son of God. Tammuz was the son of the gods. He was the son of his father, Baal. And so the pagans, which early Christianity came right out of paganism in Rome, they were already worshiping the sun god on Sunday in Rome, which is where we get worshiping on Sunday from. It used to be that all of the early Christians worshiped on Saturday, but it was changed to Sunday because all of the pagans worshiped the sun god on his day, Sunday, and they worshiped him on his birthday on December 25th. So naturally, when Jesus came into the picture and Constantine supposedly got saved in the 300s, they compromised to make it easier for people to convert to Christianity by making Jesus' birthday on the same birthday as the sun gods that they were already used to celebrating, and that's where we get December 25th from. And so what we're going to show you right now is an actual clip or a short movie of a montage of different videos that we've discovered of where they still make this celebration, still celebrate this all around the world, where they literally glorify the demonic part of Christmas and St. Nicholas and these dark helpers. There are some scholars that believe that the actual song Jingle Bells came from the Krampus bells that were in existence for a long time before that song was ever written, that every time you saw St. Nicholas, he was accompanied by the bells of Christmas, if you will, from his elves. They used to have bells that would hang from their necks, and as you heard in the video, they would you would hear the bells as they announced themselves into the next town that they were going into. Clear indication of whether or not we can do things just because we are sincere about it. Deuteronomy chapter 12 says this, "And you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, their obelisk, burn their wooden images with fire. You shall cut down the carved images of their gods and destroy their names from that place. You shall not worship the Lord your God with such things." He says, you shall not at all do as we are doing here today, every man doing whatever's right in our own eyes. Some of the most influential Christian leaders in American history were looking for alternatives and refused to celebrate Christmas and Easter because of their pagan backgrounds. Charles Spurgeon said this, on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1871, look at this quote, "We have no superstitious regard for times and seasons. Certainly we do not believe in the present ecclesiastical arrangement called Christmas. First, because we do not believe in the Mass at all, but abhor it, whether it be said or sung in Latin or English." He went on to say, and secondly, because we find no scriptural warrant whatsoever for observing any day as the birthday of our Savior. And consequently, its observance is a superstition because it's not of divine authority. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the most spiritually held up pastors of all time is Charles Spurgeon. And he himself says Christmas is of no divine origin, it's of no divine authority, and we absolutely should not celebrate it. Why? Because he knew that its origins were in paganism and cultic philosophy. We have, what did all of the disciples do in the spring that just so happens to be the time of Easter? Absolutely, it's called Passover. Luke 22:19 says this, "And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" Do Passover. Obviously, Easter was nowhere in the minds of our Lord Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah, or his disciples, or anybody for hundreds of years. They celebrated what's in Hebrew called Pesach, Passover, every single year, remembering the death, burial, and resurrection of their Lord through that incredible holiday where they used to sacrifice a Passover lamb for the remembrance of the death of the firstborn and the freedom from Egypt. But now today they were remembering the freedom from sin, freedom from Egypt, being metaphorical, by the death of Jesus himself. So they would never have connected Easter with Passover. It didn't exist. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul even instructs us in verse 8, "Therefore let us keep the festival," talking about Passover, "not with the old yeast, the yeast of malice and wickedness, but with the bread without yeast, the bread of sincerity and truth."